So what conversations came up during the lunch break, other than the fact that I've been mispronouncing the name of your town the entire time? Any other useful information come up? Nothing. You sat in complete silence. You had staring contests. Some of you went shopping. Okay, so you saw how certain things that I've said so far have applied to something that you're working with. Outstanding, because that's exactly what I want to be able to do for you. If there are certain people that you work with, certain populations that you work with that I haven't spoken to yet, the best way to solve that problem is to raise your hand and ask questions. Because in spite of what some of the social trainings out there might teach you, mind reading is not an acquirable skill. So please speak up, self-advocate. Let me know what it is you need. So anything else come up? Any questions? Yes. I should have given you the mic for that question. Do you want to stand up and ask it again? I'll try and encapsulate it. What she was asking is, do I think it's more important to teach the kids the strategies they need, or should it be more cooperative and teach the teachers that they need some flexibility too? Did I get it all? What did I miss? No, that was it. Okay. Anybody else? Anybody have answer to that question? Because we're talking about relationships. So imagine this scenario. You get together with somebody, you're going to spend the rest of your life together, and you say, it's not my problem. I didn't do anything wrong. You're the one with the problem. You're the one who needs to change. You need to do all the bending. I'm just fine. Can you say divorce court? It's the same in any relationship. The two people need to be invested in making that relationship work. So both people need the strategies to make it work. It can't be one-sided. The teachers, and we'll get into this in a little bit later, but you couldn't have known that. It's essential to explore with anybody who's involved in that dynamic what their definition of success is. And what you're ultimately going to find is that that person's definition of success is completely selfish. You know, when I am able to, you're going to hear a lot of I statements. When I'm able to do my job, when I'm not interrupted, when I'm not having to do this, this, and this. It's all going to be me, 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 me. When you hear that stuff, you know that the child doesn't have a chance. The child's needs matter less to that person. And the teacher might not be a selfish person. The teacher might just be somebody who is overburdened with one mandate after another, with loads and loads of paperwork, and just needs it to work, for crying out loud. And now you're saying, but you need to accommodate this child with this IEP, and these 10 kids over here with IEPs. And in the midst of all that, you need to be able to satisfy the requirements of the federal government, the state government, and all that stuff. And the teacher's needs aren't getting met very well either. So there is a tendency to become selfish when you yourself are very needy because no one's taking care of you. Parents are just showing up at IEP meetings saying, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that, you need to be doing that. What about me? So that imbalance causes problems for everyone. The teacher suffers, the parents suffer, the kid suffers. So we'll be talking about how to improve that balance. So that's a very important question. Now, a few people have asked me about my story. How did I get to be 35 years old without realizing there was this thing called Asperger's? Is this a common question amongst you? Okay, so I'll spend a few minutes on it. My entire life, as long as I can remember, I was always on the outside looking in. I was bullied from 5 years old to when I was a sophomore in high school. Some of it was physical. There were 3 boys all through kindergarten who every day weren't satisfied until they pushed me down repeatedly on my way home. And when they were satisfied, they'd let me get up and walk home. Did I say anything? No. Why? Probably because during that time, all I wanted to be was home. And I just did whatever I needed to get home and stay home. At any given time, if I had friends, it was friend. One friend. I remember a period of time where there was like 2 years where I didn't have any friends. And I was kind of cool with that. You know, I'd go take long walks. I'd read something. I would watch TV. I'd get lost in my imagination. Even now, I really don't have a strong longing to have people around me. And I can do good with person. 1 or 2 people is okay. More than 3, and I start to get anxious. So I won't go to parties. I won't go out to dinner dates. Any public place I need to mentally prepare for. If it's a restaurant, if it's a movie theater, I need to get ready to be there. As we talked earlier about the problems of the space. So much sensory, so much people energy, so many things happening around me. And I always remember the world being so big, so confusing. Academically, I remember spending a lot of time in the classroom just wondering what the heck was going on. Things happening way too fast. The teacher seemed to be talking a foreign language to me, and I'd spend a lot of time, everybody else around me is getting started, doing what they're supposed to be doing, and I would be sitting there frozen, not knowing what to do. And usually another student would look and say that I wasn't doing anything and would either tattle on me, Brian's not doing his work, or saying, what are you doing? And I'll say, I don't know what to do. Oh, the teacher told us to do this and do that, and then I could get started. So usually there was someone else stepping in. But it never occurred to me to speak up and ask. I just thought I was supposed to know what I was doing. And if I didn't know, I figured there's something wrong with me. 9 times out of 10, I'd wait till I would get home and my mom would explain it to me. So I made it through academically by the skin of my teeth. You know, it really wasn't anything that really mattered to me. In high school, it was kind of mediocre. B's, C's, an A here and there if it was a class I really liked. But when I look back at school, it was something I survived. Relationship-wise, in spite of my best efforts, I always managed to tick somebody off. So when I tried to give a compliment, try to give my opinion on anything, it was always inappropriate, unacceptable, rude, and I did not know what I was doing wrong. Nobody ever told me. If I would ask them, their response to me was, you should know that. You're not a child. It's common sense. Nobody offered me any guidance. Even into college, same stuff. Tried to compliment a girl on the way she looked. I thought I was being a gentleman. She thought I was being a pig. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. I tried to make friends. I couldn't connect with them. I couldn't talk about what they wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about philosophy. They wanted to talk about sports. It was very difficult to find anybody that would embrace me, take me in, and more importantly, mentor me, show me the ropes. When I went into social work, because I'll kind of say that short, after I went through cancer at 18 years old, I hated the world, I was ticked off, I was angry. I had a hard time dealing with that. So my mom connected me with a social worker that helped me get through that. And this man's presence, contribution to my life was so powerful. I thought, I can do that. I can do that for people. So I went into social work. But what do social workers need to be? Social. So when I was going through the master's program, actually the undergrad program, everybody else was meeting and talking and bonding. I was off in the corner reading, studying, people watching. I wasn't social. I mean, it was so offensive to some of them. I was accused of being arrogant and all kinds of other stuff. They made assumptions about my intentions and about my character simply because I wasn't doing what they thought I needed to be doing. And it got to be so difficult to be in that program. I actually left it for 5 years. And then at one point when I was hopping through different jobs, realizing that I was miserable. By that time I was married to someone just as nerdy as myself, who also didn't have too many friends and didn't know how to socialize, and we were both kind of lonely and got married for the wrong reasons, except for our 3 boys. So, that marriage ended, and I'm now finally married to the person I should have been married to the whole time, but, we don't always get it right the first time, do we? And I realized while raising small kids that the kind of jobs I had would not provide for my family. So I did some soul searching and realized, social work is still what I want to do. So I made a decision that I was simply going to shut up and do what I was told. So I went back to that school. I started watching people, seeing what they were doing, what they were talking about, so I could just get through it. And I got through it and got my first job. And while everybody else was playing office politics, I was asking the question, why are you putting up with that? What's that about? Why do you let a person talk to you like that? And I began speaking up. And my designated mentor was always pulling me aside saying, you can't do that. Leave it alone. But it's wrong. It doesn't make sense. You don't get it. That's just how it works. Don't worry about it. So I had spent a lot of time being reeled in, because anything that would defy logic, I would jump on it. Somebody was asking me to do something completely absurd I didn't understand. That doesn't make any sense. Why do I have to do that? No, that's ridiculous. And everybody else is around me watching me in awe for daring to break the power barrier, the unspoken bureaucratic line that you just have to suck it up whether you hate it or not. I just spoke up. Didn't make sense to me. I spoke up. So did that for many years. Hated my job. Did it anyway because I had a family to support. And then we had our first child. He was just as precocious, just as eccentric as dear old Dad. And because we didn't socialize very much, I didn't see, there weren't really any opportunities for him to bump up against any social situations that might cause him problems. He interacted with his cousins. He interacted with his parents. He interacted with his grandparents. He got very comfortable with them. And ironically, with his grandfather being who he is, with the family members being kind of quirky, go to my parents' house today for any holiday, and this is how we spend our time. You either have something you're reading, something you're watching, or some kind of handheld device you're playing with. Are you talking to each other? No. That is family time at my house. We grew up not talking to each other. Thanksgiving, you get your food and you sit down. When you're done eating, you go home. My brother brings his girlfriend over. Are you guys mad at each other? No, this is just what we do. We don't bond that way. A bunch of spectrumites. It's physical proximity is it. I feel so close to you right now. That's kind of how it worked. So I spent the majority of my life socially, having a friend here, a friend there. A lot of them that kept me around really appreciated my sense of humor. And that's what ultimately endeared me to people, I think. Because I could spend a lot of time just sitting back, being quiet, making funny observations, making people laugh, and that was enough to have me around. The girlfriends I had was pretty short-lived. I could kind of endear myself to them, but in terms of the relationship maintenance stuff, I had no clue. I can't tell you how many phone calls I got from girls where they were crying thinking I was mad at them. So what makes you think I'm mad at you? Well, you haven't called me in 2 days. I didn't have anything to talk about. And I was told that there's a problem with that. That you're supposed to call and ask, how are you? I was thinking about you today. I just wanted to say hi. It never occurred to me, literally never occurred to me to do any of that stuff. Because that's what you do in relationships. For me, You talked to somebody because you had information you needed to give or information you needed to get. That was it. You didn't talk to someone just to talk to them. So when I began diving into learning this whole connection thing, how relationships worked, I learned about attending. I learned about the key importance of reminding somebody else that they matter to you. The way they matter to you is by giving them attention, by making those simple phone calls saying, "How are you? I'm thinking about you." I needed to learn that stuff. But once I learned it, it changed everything. It was like magic in helping me connect with other people. So, being married to this wallflower, we didn't socialize much. We had a child together. We still didn't socialize much, so there's no opportunities to see that he might have some challenges. Then he got into first grade. Then this pattern of behaviors began to emerge that we'd never seen before. And we didn't hear about it for about 3 months. That he was an obsessive timekeeper in the classroom. That he insisted on knowing what was going to happen, when it was going to happen, how long it was going to happen, and if it didn't happen that way, he chewed out the teacher in front of the class. "You're a liar, you promised, you said this is how it was going to happen." He really didn't play well with the other kids, very socially awkward. And when it finally came out during a field trip, they went to go tour an old one-room schoolhouse. And there was an unexpected visit from an 80-year-old gentleman who was one of the students there. So they asked him if he would share some of his experience with the kids. This was an unplanned diversion from the established and agreed upon itinerary. So the kids sat down. The elderly gentleman began talking. But halfway through it, and this is the teacher reporting this to me, my son stood up, turned around, looked at her, and began screaming, "This is an unplanned change. This is boring. I hate this. I can't stand this. I want to go home right now." She said she had a hard time containing the laughter because she agreed with him. But she also realized at that point that he had needs she was unable to meet without further authorization, quote, IEP. So she called me in the middle of my workday and began describing these behaviors he had been exhibiting for the past several months and keeping it to herself because she was trying to manage it. And I knew enough through my social work training to know what she was getting at. She was listing his inflexibility, his obsessive timekeeping, his difficulty with change. And I kind of jokingly said, "So what, you think he's somewhere on the autism spectrum?" And she says, "Yeah, I think maybe he is." So it took me a second to catch my breath, and then I asked her, "What do we do now?" And she said, "Well, I've got to, write these reports and submit these documents, and then we'll have a meeting with the problem-solving team," is what she called them. That was an oxymoron if I ever heard one. So within about a week or two, we had a meeting with the problem-solving team that consisted of a lot of bureaucrats who never stepped foot in a classroom and the teacher. And while his needs were going more and more unmet, and he was getting more and more anxious in the classroom, it was beginning to have meltdowns, turning the chairs over, threatening physical violence against the teacher and his classmates, running out of the room and trying to run out of the building several times a week. The special ed administrator says, "Well, we have 60 days to do a case study." I said, "He's in crisis today. What are you going to do today?" "Well, the law requires." She's very lucky she was on the other end of the table. She was spouting off her bureaucratic nonsense and was not listening to me, the teacher, and clearly did not see the needs of my child. So I proceeded to take the bull by the horns. I made my own phone calls, got my own referrals, got him assessed, and when I took him into the psychologist's office, he was making no eye contact with her or me. He was walking around the room, touching things, opening things. He picked up a slinky, began spinning it and bouncing on his toes, stuff I never saw him do at home. Because when he was at home, he was within his comfort zone. He was calm, he was focused. He didn't have to do a whole lot of regulation. Took him out of his environment and he was a nervous wreck. And I looked at her and I said, I don't know what he's doing. I've never seen this stuff before. So she's taking her notes, asking me a bunch of questions. says, well, this is Asperger's syndrome. Well, what the heck do I do now? Well, she gave me some guidance on how to go back and talk to the school and say what he needed. They didn't care. They saw how he was in the classroom. They didn't care why he was that way. They wanted to stop. He needed to be a good little student who submitted as required. Put him on medication, tell him to behave. That was their solution. My solution was to homeschool him before he had permanent PTSD. Okay, so I ended up pulling him out. But in the midst of getting his assessments, we went to the occupational therapist. The occupational therapist says, here, I want you to fill out these forms while I have him go and play in this little jungle gym here, and I'll observe him. I start seeing things like, do you have sensitivity to bright light? Do you cover your eyes when it's sunlight? Do you hate tags in the back of your shirt? Do you have to hold on railings when you go up staircases? And I'm starting to see, is this the adult form or is this the child form? And as I began answering the questions for myself, I turned to her and I said, do you have a second form that I can fill out for myself? Because I think this is me too. And she looked at me and said, don't you already know? Because I guess I was exhibiting a lot of stuff where she figured, how could I not? I was avoiding eye contact. I was turning my eyes away from the bright fluorescent lights. I was touching the walls as I was walking in. I got a lot of this from her later when she felt comfortable telling me what her observations were. But my sensory experience of the world, I had no idea this was not a common experience. This is just how I did life. This is just how I navigated everything. So as this wave of self-awareness started coming in, I made an appointment to see the same psychologist that assessed my son. And I sat there, and I was shaking, and I was really self-conscious. I felt completely vulnerable and totally exposed because I knew what I was getting into was paradigm shifting for my self-concept. And I was trying to look at her, and while I was talking to her, and she says, you know what, you don't have to look at me if you don't want to. And that's when I knew I was talking to somebody who got it and somebody who I could trust. So I just started pouring out my life story, all the difficulties I'd been having ever since I was a kid, the difficulties I was currently having, and she just listened and she pretty much confirmed what I already knew. So at that point, I needed to make a decision about what was this ultimately going to mean for me? Did it have to mean anything? Did I have to take on this label? Did I have to incorporate it into my understanding of who I was? And for a while, I embraced this label, Aspie, which is something that community has adopted to remove the stigma of the syndrome for themselves, to embrace the eccentricity that is part of who they are. And for a while, I was a proud Aspie. Even put it on my license plate, Aspie. Put it out there, I was proud of it, I was a proud Aspie. And I spent several years there until it occurred to me one day that although I spent all my life as an outsider, not being able to fit in, not being able to connect with other people, the more I stood behind that label, the more I kept everybody else out. The more I thought Aspie, the more I thought how different I am from everybody else. This is why I'm different. This is why I can't relate to you. This is why you don't understand. This is why you don't get it. And that was the conversation that community was having. We need to sit down and talk about how everybody doesn't understand, how everybody doesn't get it, how everybody's clueless, all those neurotypicals out there. And I realized that very conversation was destructive, it was toxic, it was not a conversation I wanted to have. So at that time, I decided I'm not going to be an Aspie. I'm not going to be a neurotypical. I'm going to be a human being. Because by being a human being, I am connected to everybody. We have the same chronic condition in common, and that is called the human condition. And as long as I understand what that is, understand what we all have in common, that we're all trying to figure it out, none of us gets it, in spite of the wonderful stories we tell ourselves about how much we have it all together. We all have the human condition in common. And as long as I embraced the label human being, there wasn't anybody out there that I couldn't reach out to and connect with, because I let go of that conversation that told me Aspie is who I was and neurotypical is who everybody else was. And that realization was far more liberating for me than the realization that I was somewhere on this arbitrary autism spectrum that a bunch of psychiatrists sat together and decided existed. Anybody else have a headache after that? Does this all make sense? So that's where I'm at now. And of course, this is a journey. I mean, we're all in this process. Who knows how I'm gonna think about this next year or 5 years from now? This is where I'm at today. And whenever any of my boys bring up well, it's because I have autism that I can't do that. So no, you can't do it because you don't have the strategy yet. That's why. So if someone says I can't do it because I'm a guy, really? When did you make that decision? I can't do it because I'm dyslexic. Really? When did you decide that? Says who? Everybody here familiar with Virgin Mobile, Virgin Airlines? You know who started all that stuff? Richard Branson. Didn't go to college, barely made it out of high school, and he's a dyslexic. He's also a multi-billionaire who owns about 800 companies. Do you think he believes in the word can't? He's one resourceful individual that also realizes if he can't figure it out, he'll find somebody who can. He'll align himself with them. He will borrow their gifts while he shares his. You know what we call that? We call that life. We call that leveraging each other's strengths. That's part of the human condition. It's not about sitting around assessing all the things you can and can't do, finding reasons not to take risks, not to take chances, and not to be vulnerable with each other. Oftentimes, the labels give us permission to be stuck, and people will often use it for that reason. The label cannot tell you who you are. At best, the label should only be used to tell you where you're at. Oh, your child has autism. Okay. Tell me what that means for my child now. And then I will tell you where my child's going to be in 5 years and 10 years. And if you're not going to help me get my child there, you're fired. That's just my 2 cents. Any questions on that? I try not to monologue. Why'd you let me do that? So, thoughts, questions, comments. And feel free to ask me personal questions, okay? I did for a while. Kind of homeschooled my oldest off and on when I felt that the system was simply incapable or unwilling to support him. We homeschooled him for the past 6 months because the bullying situation got so out of hand he became suicidal and didn't want to go back to school. So we pulled him for the remainder of middle school. And he's decided, we moved to a different community, he's decided he wants to try the high school. So I let him know that one of the last things I want to teach him is that when the going gets tough, Dad can simply run in and rescue him. So I said, if you're going to do this, we're going to do this whether it's hard or not. But if I need to begin walking the school halls with him and embarrassing the school staff for not stepping up, that's exactly what I'm prepared to do. And I will bill them for my time, because I would have to take time away from my clients to do this. And if they doubt me when I show up that day in class, I'll understand I'm serious. And I won't be doing it to be difficult. I'll be doing it to apply leverage, to encourage them to step up and realize they can do more and must do more for him and everybody else that suffers under those circumstances. But I also want to teach him to be more resourceful and more resilient in those circumstances, because no matter where he goes, there will be bullies. There will be people who hold themselves to a lower standard of personal conduct. I'm sure that you have encountered some of them, yes, in the workplace? People who feel significant by making others feel insignificant. People who would rather connect with somebody else who laughs at their jokes at somebody else's expense instead of realizing that their actual purpose on this planet is just showing everybody else that they matter. Some people, unfortunately, hold themselves to a lower standard. But I teach my kids to hold themselves to a higher standard. I teach them that they are first and foremost role models for how to be a high-quality human being. And anybody can do that. Ask a little bit more of yourself. You don't have to win a trophy. You don't have to win an award. You just have to be a decent human being to everybody else you come in contact with. And that's what I encourage them to do. No label can prevent you from doing that. You can make that choice here, now, in this moment with the person in front of you. That's what life is, and that's what I teach my kids. They are role models first and foremost. Role models for how to be a decent human being. How's that for a tangent? Questions, comments? Okay. Well, for my son, the bullying wasn't subtle. She asked, how do you get them to recognize the bullying? People were shooting rubber bands in his face. They were knocking books out of his hands. It was really, really obvious. He was being victimized. And you know why he was being victimized? Because he was smart. Because the teachers approved of him. Because he was well-mannered and cooperated in class. Because he raised his hand. Because he knew the information. You know what the bullies were doing? They were punishing success. That's what a lot of bullying is. It looks to people that are doing well and wants them to feel bad about it. There are too many kids that you meet that say, I don't want to be too smart because people won't like me. How pathetic is that? And yet it happens. But unfortunately, the school dealt with it reactively. Let me know when someone does something, then we'll deal with it one bully at a time. Well, what happens when there are 8 bullies? Then you deal with them, and then other bullies come out of the woodwork. And what was the essential problem there? The essential problem is that character is not part of the curriculum in the school system. The belief that we are put here to attend to others, to be considerate, polite, to use our gifts, to help strengthen everybody else's experience and add value to their lives, because that is missing in the classroom is why bullying happens. Period. But because I raised my children to have good character, he was still nice to those kids. He was still nice to everybody else. Because it didn't make sense to him that you would treat somebody else badly even though they did it to you first. Of course, it really doesn't apply when he's dealing with his brothers, but that's another story. He started it. All bets are off when it comes to siblings. One of the neatest things that did happen when we took him out of school was he said, nobody likes me, everybody hates me, I don't have any friends. When we pulled him out of school, suddenly he was getting emails, he was getting phone calls. Where are you? What happened? You were there one day and then you left. These were kids that were quiet just like him, didn't speak up, didn't stand out, were shy, were a little nerdy, that looked forward to seeing him every day because he was so good to them, because he was funny, because when they were being bullied too, they were certain that when Zach showed up, they'd be appreciated. He was doing all the things he was raised to do, but he really didn't get any feedback on it. So he thought he wasn't being well received. So there were like 3 or 4 kids that reached out to him after that. That changed things for him in terms of how he felt he was valued there. So that has been a significant benefit. I don't know that he really would have connected with these kids on the level that he has if we hadn't pulled him out of school. Because in some ways they kind of took him for granted because he was a constant. And one of them, he's on the Skype with every night. A girl. And they have expressed a desire to experiment with dating. Again, I don't think this is anything that would have happened had he stayed in school. Because they're both shy, they both wouldn't speak up. So it's interesting how you can turn lemonade out of lemons in certain situations. But it's not good, bad, right, wrong. It's part of his journey. These are certain events that have occurred. We made certain decisions about how we were going to manage it. And then there are all these outcomes that occur as a result. Whether you sit back and ask yourself, well, I wonder if it would have been better if we stayed in. If we took him out, did we take him out sooner? Should we have kept him in longer? Don't ask yourself those questions. The only questions you need to ask yourself is, what's next? Where do we go from here? Because second guessing the past doesn't teach you anything. It teaches you to feel regret, feel guilt, and all kinds of negative stuff you can't use. You make the decisions you do the very best you can in the moment with the information you have. But if nothing else, you keep moving forward. That is resilience. Keep getting up, keep moving. Questions? Comments? Yes.
I think that we should teach our children to be more mentors, like so-called regular ed. And we all have strengths. Each of us teach another child our strengths and mentoring.
Yeah, teach our kids to be mentors. How do you think you teach them to be mentors? How do you teach it? Louder? The way you teach it is by modeling it. You act as though you are being watched. You act as though you are a role model for your children. You take 100% responsibility for everything you put out there. And when you let them know that's how you're walking, that's how you're talking, they'll begin to model that too. They'll take on the same level of responsibility. Because you can't be the parent that smokes and does it in front of your kid and says, don't smoke, it's a bad habit. You cannot be a hypocrite and expect your kids to learn anything from you. If you want them to be mentors, be their mentor. If you want to teach them patience, be patient. When you are impatient, call yourself out on it and apologize. I let my kids call me out on my human moments. Because if I hold them to a standard and they see me not doing it, they need to be able to call me out on it. And I'll be darned if I pull well, I'm the parent, I can do whatever I want. That's being a hypocrite. When they do call me out on it, I apologize, and I step back up to my higher standard, and I keep going. And because we can have that kind of respect, that open and honest dialogue, guess what they learn to do too? Be better human beings who realize they can have imperfect moments, and it doesn't make them a bad person, it makes them human. If you be their role model, you teach them to be role models for others, they realize they have a responsibility to other people. That's how you do it, you model it. You can't just ask for it. You must do it. So when you think of the total experience cycle, what must you think, feel, how must you hold yourself, and what actions must you take to be that way? If you're consistent, if you're congruent, you do it with your kids, you'll be amazed who they become. You look at my kids today, and when we go to their IEP meetings, they're looking less and less like they're on the spectrum. And you know what? I don't care. Because what I'm seeing is growth. I'm seeing people that are maturing. I'm seeing that they're achieving, that they're developing more skills. And even if there's an area where they haven't developed a skill, have they developed the ability to be okay with that and reach out to somebody else that has that skill so they can partner with that person and move forward? If so, yay. Because part of their recipe for success can't be that they must carry this label the rest of their lives. Because the only label I'm interested in my kids having is human being. I mean, there are some people that are terrified of losing the label because they lose the safety net. I have adult clients that are on disability that have decided that it is too dangerous to grow. I can't develop new skills. I can't go back to school. I cannot risk getting a job that's going to allow me to have more of what I want because the safety net might go away. They decided that certainty and safety is the measure of success. And that's part of the sin of the system. That they set people up to be overly dependent. So when I ask them, I say, what matters more to you? Living in fear that you might lose something, or living in the confidence of knowing that you can do it no matter what? Because you have the skills, you have the resources, you have the network around you to pull you through anything. Which would you rather have? But if you want the latter, you have to work for it. Because it's amazing some of the things that my wife and I have been able to get through in our lives because of the people around us that helped us. Family, some close friends. A network that we created very strategically because we knew where we were not strong and where we needed people that were strong. And we brought those people into our lives. So when we fall in those areas, we know who to go to. And those people in our lives also know what we're good at. So when they fall and need us, we step up. No hesitation. Why? Because that's what relationships are. Reciprocity. Give and give. Questions? Comments?
I wanted to say something about the bullying.
Okay.
I am not a parent of autistic child, but I do have a child with a severe hearing loss. And he's the youngest in our family. He was adopted at birth, and he grew up as a black kid in an all-white family in an all-white town. And he was, and he's a, in seventh grade, I would even say sixth grade. He was 6 feet tall, a big tall black. And he was the target of a lot of ridicule. And I said, and especially when he played sports, he's a very good athlete, very athletic, and he had breasts when seventh and eighth grade boys did. And I said, Ryan, quit worrying about it. Pretty soon those are going to be muscles, and the rest of them will have flaps. So just, but the harassment continued, and there was one kid that continually picked fights, and Ryan got to the point where he just felt he had to fight back. And both of them got kicked out of school for it, and they missed a sixth grade field trip. And I took the young man that was antagonizing Ryan, I went to his mother. His parents were in the process of divorce, which is part of the problem, or part of the issue. And I said, can we take Luke for a weekend? And instead of Ryan and Luke going on the sixth grade field trip that they missed out on, we took them, we were living in Washington State, we took them to the ocean for a weekend. And I said, I don't care what it takes, you two are going to learn to get along with each other. You don't have to like each other. When you get back to school, you don't have to have anything to do with each other. But for one weekend, you're going to like each other, you're going to respect each other, and you're going to get along. And they were never great friends after that weekend, but I never had a problem with that kid ever again.
Everybody hear that?
I never had one problem with that kid, and Ryan said, he'll acknowledge me at school, and we'll acknowledge each other, but he never ever picked on me again, and I never retaliated for the things.
The synopsis is she adopted a black child at birth. He had a significant hearing loss. He stood out because he was a black kid in an all-white town, all-white school. One kid singled him out to bully him. And when your son decided to retaliate, he and the bully both got kicked out. She took it upon herself to say, well, instead of missing the field trip that you would have attended if you hadn't fought, you're going to spend the weekend together and learn to coexist. You don't have to like each other, but you do need to be decent human beings to each other. And that's what you did. Essentially, right? Were you able to get from your son or this other child what changed in their belief system that allowed that to happen?
Part of it was Luke's parents were going through a divorce, and
So the other boy's parents were going through a divorce.
he was abandoned by his dad, and they just talked, and they just came to an understanding of where each other was in their lives and why bullying wasn't the answer.
So in talking with each other, they realized that they both hurt in some way. They found some common ground in the fact that they experienced the human condition similarly. And whereas this other boy was, for whatever reason, chose your son to vent his frustrations on, in some respect, he found somebody else who actually understood him. And I think in some way found some respect in that kindred spirit. Why would you hurt someone that gets you? Because part of connection is feeling gotten, feeling understood. So even though there might not have been enough time they had together to fully connect, they at least had enough time together to realize that, okay, I'm not this freak of nature that everybody's looking at and judging. Because you know when you're really self-conscious and really vulnerable, you tend to feel like all eyes are on you. But in the time those two spent together, brilliant of you to do that, by the way. And it sounds like you allowed for some very deep healing to take place for both of those boys. So congratulations to you for doing that. Just one weekend.
And I mean, this was like sixth grade, and I don't know if Luke graduated, but I know they went to high school together. But we never had a problem with that kid or any of that kid's buddies ever again.
And there's some line of thinking out there, the whole bullies to buddies idea, that if you just get these kids together, they'll learn to be friends. That won't work in every scenario, because there are some bullies that are just so deeply hurt, they don't trust anybody. They have seen people as just out to wound them or abandon them somehow. Some of these kids have deeper issues that won't be remedied by just having a little powwow. And those are some of the kids that were victimizing my son. Had some serious stuff going on, and they just wanted to punish everybody because they saw people as a source of pain. Fortunately for you, that situation, it really worked out well. So, well done.
And then Ryan got bigger and taller and stronger and literally were harassing me.
That's one of the benefits of getting bigger and stronger. In my case, I was kind of tall, but I was skinny, but I also had a dad that taught martial arts in the special forces. So he taught me a thing or two, and a couple bullies pushed me one too many times, and I did one thing one time, and then it got out, don't piss him off. So I don't advocate that as a reaction. Being physical is always a method of last resort. Yeah. So any more questions, comments about that? I mean, I'm almost afraid to dive back into the content because it feels like we're having this moment together. Okay, well, always feel free to raise your hand and ask some more stuff, especially if I'm not giving you content for the unique area that you work in your lives. You must ask. If you do not ask, you do not get. Okay? And case in point, I'll get to you in just a second. I did a training a few months ago for an entire auditorium full of teachers. And one lady came up during one of the breaks and said, you haven't talked at all about this group of kids and this group of kids, whatever. And I said, oh, you're right about that. She says, and I work with these kids all the time, and you haven't said anything about this. I said, how many questions have you asked? She said, none. I said, well, that's why you haven't got any of that information. Oh, well, I'm not comfortable raising my hand in front of others. You're a teacher, right? And because it was just her and I kind of called her out on that. I said, do you grade for class participation? Yes. Why do you grade on class participation if you're not willing to do it yourself? I said, you need to realize that you are in a room full of people that are here to learn. They will not fault you for not being the smartest kid in the room because that's not your job today. You are here today to learn something. If you do not raise your hand, you won't learn it. And anybody else around here that raising their hands, they see you raise your hand, they expect it. Heck, I'm not the smartest kid in the room. I know my experiences. That's it. I've learned today from yours. I'm grateful for everybody that has raised their hand and shared something that helped me and helped everybody else in this room. So we are in the same place on the same page. There's all something we do not know. We will not know unless somebody else speaks up and gives us that information. Okay? There's a hand over here. She asked if my oldest son, when we homeschooled him, if he had social opportunities. See, I locked him in the closet with an iPad and allowed him to watch simulations on YouTube. And that's one of the biggest concerns that people ask, is they think if they're not in that mosh pit of sensory overload called a cafeteria, that kids don't learn healthy socialization. In my personal opinion, the worst place kids can learn socialization is from their peers. Because what do these kids know how to do? Backstab, gossip, criticize. All that dysfunctional garbage. So one of the best things I had in homeschooling is I had quality control. I could ask him, what kind of experience do you want to have socially? What do you want to have happen when you talk to that person? I want to be their friend. Really? How do you do that? My middle boy would just say, walk up, want to be my friend? Sure. And they'd be the best friends for 5 minutes, as long as they were running around the tubes at the playland. Next thing you know, they're going to be best friends forever. They're going to go to each other's birthday party. They're going to have a sleepover. But as soon as it was time to go home, they forgot about all that. But in order to teach kids competent social strategies, not skills, because dribbling a basketball is a skill, okay? But if you can't do it while playing a game, you can't use it. You need to be able to take that skill and have a strategy for how to implement it real time in context. Kids need strategies, not skills, okay? So I was able to ask him, who do you want to approach? What's your outcome? You want to connect with them? You want to let them know that you care about them. You want to invite them someplace. Okay, how do you do that? And one thing that's really cool is when you know your outcome, you know what you want to accomplish, you don't need to remember scripts. Because scripting is mechanical. Scripting are skills. When I say this, you say that. When I say this, you say that. It's not a conversation, it's a tennis match. When you know what your outcome is, all of a sudden, the words come. If you want to invite someone over for a sleepover, how would you let them know that? Oh, I would say this. Did I tell you to say that? No, it just makes sense to say that. Okay, is there anything they need to say to you? Yeah, they need to say this. How are you going to get that information from them? I'm going to ask them this question. All that came from a kid who supposedly doesn't know squat about social strategies because he knew his outcome. As opposed to someone else sitting down with some preconceived notions about what it means to have an effective social interaction and tell them what the script is. They don't know what their outcome is, they're just doing what they're told. Well, Mr. Psychologist told me this is what I'm supposed to say. Mr. Social Skills teacher said this is how it's supposed to go. And if the other person across me doesn't do their part and doesn't say what they're supposed to say, as it was predetermined in a script, I'm going to shut down. But if you know what your outcome is, even if the person across from you changes the script, you still know your outcome. So you can continue to go after it. Continue to self-advocate, let the other person know, okay, well, maybe I'm not speaking clearly. I know what my outcome is. I'm not getting there yet. Let me give more information or ask more questions to get there. We'll talk more about that as we go, by the way, because there's a specific strategy for how to do that. So since it sounds like some of the questions are moving back into the content, let's spend a little time there. But feel free to tangent. I do it all the time. The page we left off on is titled Sensory Language. Everybody see that? The real fun thing about this is it allows you to listen to the way a person talks to cue into how they see the world. Because we all know about learning styles, right? Right. Different ways of learning. Some people are primarily visual, some people are primarily auditory, some people are primarily kinesthetic, like my dad. Works with his hands, everything's about his body. I'm primarily auditory. I need to hear it or I don't get it. If you try and show me PowerPoint, pictures, graphs, I'll be scratching my head the whole time. And with a bald head, it starts to callous, so I don't want to do that. It has to be auditory for me, which is why I talk so much. But if you want to learn how somebody else learns, how they see the world, so you can connect with them even more effectively, you need to listen to the words they use. Some of the most common disconnects in a classroom setting is a disconnect between learning style. Where if someone says, I don't understand this, can you explain it to me? And the teacher says, sure, let me show you. And then they begin to write something up on the board. Where is the disconnect in that moment? The request was, can you explain it to me? That's a request for auditory information. And the teacher says, let me show you. That's visual. I can't tell you how many kids I've worked with over the years that says, the teacher doesn't help me. The teacher never helps me. Then I go to the teacher. Well, can you explain this? Every time he raises his hand, I go over there. I do this. I'm giving all the help I can. I don't know what he's talking about. So what the child is essentially saying is, the way you're helping me is not effective. It doesn't help. It's not that you aren't going through the motions. It's not that you aren't making an effort. It's that you are not effective. So when we get more into the child's learning style, we find out where the disconnect is. Maybe a child needs to get up and move and walk around and think about it, because being very kinesthetic and using their body helps organize their thinking. They need to move to think about it. Sometimes pacing helps. Anybody have a kid that paces or likes to fidget or chew on something while they're thinking? That's part of their strategy. That's part of how they organize to think straight. You deny them that because it's not appropriate, and you are basically setting the child up for failure. So you look at this wonderful little cheat sheet I gave you. You look at all the different words that a person can possibly use to cue you in to how they are thinking about that experience in that moment. So you ask them, so, you went on a date, huh? What was it like? Well, I felt like we really clicked. That's auditory. Or if someone says, well, she was nice, but something just didn't sit well with me. That's kinesthetic. When you look at those words down there, can you think of a time when you talk like that, or can you think of anybody else around you that uses a lot of this language? I can see some nods. What about this looks familiar to you? For those of you who aren't looking at the page. See, clearly for me, you're going to hear a lot of auditory, but keep in mind, it's not going to be strict because we use all of our senses. There's going to be some situations where you have a combination. Somebody might say, well, it looked like it was going to work out. But after a while, something about it, just didn't feel right. Or someone wants to talk to you and say, I really want to discuss something with you. It's really important for me to explain to you how this is going to work, and I really need you to listen. If you say it to somebody who is highly visual, you might lose them. Because you want to deliver them something purely auditory. Now, one thing that's unique, there's a unique learning style on there that you'll see called digital logical. That's someone who tends to really dispense with sensory and go pure logic. You'll find a lot of people on the spectrum that are pure logic, information people. So they won't say to you, I really need you to look at this from my perspective. That's visual. I need you to look at it and see it this way. I want you to imagine. Or they won't say, I really need you to hear what I'm saying because it doesn't feel like it to me that you're listening to me. They won't talk like that. They'll say, we need to have a discussion about a topic of utmost importance. It's important that we consider this, that we reflect at length, and when we've collected adequate data, we will sit down again and review the information at hand and make the necessary decisions. Those are the information seekers. So if you say to them, well, can you show me how we're going to do that? Well, there are a variety of ways that we can consider this data. That's one potential modality. I'll give it some due consideration, and I'll report back to you at my earliest convenience. So when you hear people talk, it's really important to have this as a point of reference. Because if you want to connect with them, if you want to teach them, if you want to learn from them, you need to know how they see and filter the world. So this is important to review, to go back and just start listening to people. Listen to yourselves. Because we talked earlier about sensory filtering, how we take in information throughout the world, how we make sense of it. One of the biggest clues into somebody else's world is the language they use. Is this information helpful? Do we need a break again? How y'all doing? You need to get up and stretch? Does anybody need to get up and stretch? Now is the time. Stand, stretch, get blood in your veins. Anybody need about 5 or 10 minutes? 5? Okay, I've got a request for 5 minutes. Let's take 5 minutes and come back. I'd like to say things are going to get easier from here on out, but I wouldn't do that to you. This next part is going to require a little bit more thinking, maybe more so than you're used to doing. But I promise it won't be too painful. Because here's where we get into the part where things really get concrete, really get usable, and where you really learn to begin implementing the foundation we've been laying to this point. So let's get into a discussion about the software between our ears, the programming that we use to navigate this world of ours. the software that determines what our options are, what resources are available to us, what kind of people that we have in our lives, what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. And all of those distinctions are determined by our beliefs and values. The way we decide the world operates. What are the rules out there? For not only the way the world works, but for our place in it. Now, what's the difference between a belief and a value? Is there a difference? I'll make it easy for you. A value is something, an experience you want to have in life. You value feeling accepted. You value being respected. A belief is your rule about how you have that experience. So if you value being respected, your belief might be, I feel respected when someone calls me Mr. I feel respected when someone says please or thank you. If you value being loved, your belief might be, I feel loved when you give me a gift on my birthday. I feel loved when you tell me you appreciate me. So a belief is a rule for how that need gets met. So if someone says, you don't love me. Yeah, I do. What makes you think I don't love you? You never tell me. What that person just told you is, I have a belief about what I need from you to feel loved by you. You must tell me. You see how that works? So one of the biggest problems in relationships is people run around with all these beliefs, all these rules for how relationships need to work, how life needs to work, but they don't let anybody else in on it. They just expect you're going to know. Why? Because if you love me, you would just know. I shouldn't have to tell you. You're supposed to mind read. It's one of the prerequisites of our relationship. Anybody else been on the receiving end of this? Anybody been on the delivering end of this? Why? Because you're human. You do this. The only way you can alter it is by being aware that you do this. Now, at the bottom of that page, there's a sample list of values, experiences that you may want to have at any given time. And some of those things might even be things that never occurred to you as being values of yours, because they kind of come and go really quickly. Some of them, if you reflect upon it, you might say, you know what? That really is important to me, but I've just done without it so long because life happens. I've had so little opportunity to do it, but now that I reflect upon it, that's something that's really missing for me. You know, one of those experiences is community. Somebody who used to do a lot of volunteer work, but then they got married, had kids, their job began demanding more of them. They got so caught up in it. They thought they were being successful. Everybody told them what a great job they were doing, and yet something substantial was missing. And they didn't know what it was. When you think about it, you say, man, I really miss that volunteering. I really miss that sense of community, of contribution, of being a part of something. And once you realize that, then you think, man, I need to reprioritize. I need to get that value back. And maybe your belief about it is, I feel my greatest sense of community when I'm volunteering in this specific context, helping these specific people. So knowing your belief is important too. Thoughts? Comments? Who wants to share what some of their core values are? Anybody here, one of your core values, making a lot of money? Because from what you told me at the outset here, I didn't get that opinion. I'm a paraprofessional at public school system because I intend to make 7 figures and retire when I'm 30. Because that belief and that value are not in sync. There was a hand over here. Honesty. So that's a value that you have. What is your belief around honesty? Is honesty a value? Can you tweak it a little bit? What do you think about trust? Possibly. So if you are experiencing trust, how does that happen? What must you do? What must somebody else do for you to feel that there is trust in your relationship? And you can't use the same word in the sentence. How about when someone says they're going to do something and actually does it? I feel like I can trust them. When the person that they say they are is the person they end up being consistently, I can trust them. Because it's important to know what the rules are. Because there are plenty of people who feel like something is missing in their relationship but can't tell you how to improve it. And I just don't feel like I can trust you. What do I need to do? I don't know. That happens too in relationships. It's unfortunate. And some of it can be because a person is misidentifying what their value actually is. They know something's missing. They just grab something out of the sky. I don't think it's trust. Maybe it's not trust. Maybe it's something else. But if you don't know the means to that end, chances are you're barking at the wrong tree. You need to keep looking. Little lists like this help. So someone can circle it and say, tell me what you need. Tell me what you want. Creativity, happiness, kindness, spirituality. Because what you ultimately want to do on that list is find like the top 5. The ones that really drive you, the ones that a day does not feel complete if you have not had that experience, if that has not been met. People that are really big on significance, maybe they're going to be highly competitive. They want to get a lot of thank yous. They want to get a lot of attaboys. They want to get a lot of congratulations, and they don't feel like they've accomplished anything unless they get that stuff. Because they have beliefs like, unless someone tells me I did a good job, I didn't do one. I don't feel loved unless someone tells me they love me. Or there's some people that say, I know that I matter, and no one needs to tell me a darn thing for me to know that. So one of their beliefs is that it's intrinsic, it's internal. Their own sense of their own worth is enough for them. They don't need it from somebody else. But for some people, their self-worth is absolutely tied to feedback from others. Well, you need to know this about yourself because this is what drives you, your beliefs and your values. And when you interact with somebody else, your beliefs and your values about what you think is possible for that person is what motivates you. What if they don't agree with you? If you think, I believe you can do anything. I believe if you put your mind to it, you can accomplish whatever you want. But the person looking back at you says, but I have a learning disorder. But I have this label that says I can't. If you have a rules conflict, you are not on the same page. You cannot effectively help somebody else if you're playing by the same rules. If somebody shows up to play football and you show up to play baseball, you're not playing the same game. You're not going to be effective together. So how do you find out if you're on the same page with the person you're working with? Or the person you want to be friends with? The person you want to be married to? What are you going to ask them? Yeah, you first need to know what your own beliefs and values are. What are your rules? About what? The most important areas of your life. Family, finances, relationships, communication. If religion or spirituality is in there, if politics is a big deal there, you want to know what your beliefs and values are there. If exercise is a big part of your life, You need to know what your beliefs and values are about that. If that's a shared experience that you absolutely require in a life partner, you've got to know what those beliefs and values are so you can check in with the person you're considering and see if they're in alignment with you. If you're working with a child that's on the spectrum, let's say this child is nonverbal. How do you find out what their beliefs and values are? You can watch them. What do they seek? What do they avoid? What they seek is what they believe will give them pleasure. What they avoid is what they believe will give them pain. Basic human experience. Seek pleasure, avoid pain. And they don't always have to use their words to let you know what that is. Sometimes it's simple as giving them an opportunity to do something. They avoid a certain texture, avoid a certain food, or seek something out. That tells you right then and there. They seek out a picture book. Maybe they like books. Maybe they like that specific book. Maybe they like those pictures. That's giving you a lot of information. Maybe they like to do the same thing over and over again, kinesthetically. Maybe they like to hear the same sound over and over again, auditory. And what experience do they have when they're doing it? They get more excited, they get calmer. They feel more organized, they're more calm and focused. Just watch, be their student. It's too easy with all the education and the job description to think you're the smartest kid in the room with someone that's supposedly challenged, low IQ, but you are as much their student as they are yours. Because you are ultimately in a collaboration, in a partnership to create results. That child is as essential a means to that end as you are. So you need to be on the same page. Can you force somebody to grow? I mean, there are some approaches out there that, unfortunately, have some very coercive tactics that try to get someone to submit to the goal. But long term, that's not a useful strategy. Because getting someone to submit is teaching them to be helpless and given to the will of others. It does not teach them self-determination. So just think about that little nugget. One of the pages there you can definitely do on your own. I just ask you to list your top 10 beliefs. And it can be about anything. Your beliefs about relationships, your beliefs about politics, your beliefs about life in general. And you can make that a list of 100 if you want. Because the important thing for you to do is understand your rules. Because the vast majority of people have rules they did not choose. They have rules that were taught to them by somebody else. Was modeled for them by key people in their lives. Their parents, their teachers, whoever they see on TV that they think is a really cool person. Well, I heard this wonderful saying one time, and this person says, if you do this, you get this, and it sounds good to me, so I'm just going to adopt it. And you really didn't examine it. You just soaked it in. When I was trying to decode this thing called human communication, human relationships, and I began asking people, why that? Why do you shake hands when you meet somebody? Well, it's because how it's done. Why? Who taught you to do that? Well, I was always taught when you meet somebody, shake their hand. Well, do you have to do it that way? Well, yeah, I think you do. Why? What's the rule? What's being said? Well, I don't know. It's just how it's done. And there are people who just did it their entire lives and didn't know why they did it. You have to look at somebody when you talk to them. Why? Because that's how they know you're listening. Really? And as we established earlier, is it possible for me to not be listening? What if I don't multitask with my senses? What if I can't look at you and hear at the same time? Does that matter? Would you much rather think I'm listening to you? Or would you much more prefer I'm actually listening to you? Well, both. But what if what you're asking me to do is something I cannot provide based upon the fact that I sensorily unitask? which means I can use one, but I can't use both. What do you do then? Oh, I don't know. Anybody have this issue? Amen, brother. So what do you do about that? You use a strategy I call a social disclaimer, which means you very diplomatically let somebody know that you're about to break an established social rule, but in a way that is going to meet their need, and guess what? They're going to be okay with it. They're not going to smite you and burn you at the stake because you failed to make eye contact. So let me tell you how I do it. If somebody's talking to me and really wants me to look at them, know they're being listened to, but I know that I'm starting to get tired for sustaining eye contact, I know I need to look away to really hear them. If it's in a quiet room, I assume the thinker pose. Very fascinating. A lot to think about. And I'll look back, I'll look at a forehead, I'll look at a nose, anything but their eyes because it's too tiring. If it's in a noisy place, which is hard enough to beat anyway, I'll say, hey, you know what? It's really noisy in here. It's kind of getting harder to hear you. So I'm just going to turn in my ear a little bit closer to you because it's really important for me to hear what you need to say, and I really want to make sure that I hear you, okay? Are we good? All right. Now, continue. Now I can look away and put my ear in. They know that I'm listening. They know they have my attention, and they know how I'm doing it because I just told them. I'm listening to you, and this is how I'm doing it. And they're okay with it. They don't say, you need to look at me or I feel like you're not listening to me. I just told them I'm listening to them and how I'm doing it. And they're okay with it. I have yet to be shunned using either of those strategies. They just need to know that you're attending to them and listening to them and how you're doing it. It's in the absence of that clarification that they don't know whether they're being listened to or not. So anybody who says, on any kind of a goal, you need to make eye contact in order to have a connection, tell that to a blind person. Somehow they make it work. How do you tell a person that's completely deaf? Are you listening to me? Well, I'm taking in the conversation we're having, but I'm doing it visually and kinesthetically, not auditorily. We're still having a conversation. But what creates that disconnect is the difference in rules between the two people in terms of what connection and communication means. If for one connection, for one person, the definition means you must be looking at me, your body must be facing, and if you're not doing that, you're not listening. Well, what if my definition of listening is I'm turned to the side, I have my ear turned towards you, and I'm taking in everything you're saying, and maybe there's a bit of a delay in my processing. So maybe I need you to slow down so that I have time to take everything, but you say, no, I don't have a lot of time, just let me get it all out, and then we'll be on the same page. You want to be able to talk fast? I need you to talk slow. You want me to look at you? I need to be able to look away. Now, what allows us to overcome that disconnect is to know what our rules are so we can put it out there and then find a middle ground. Right? It's important for teachers to understand it about students. It's important for parents to understand it about kids. And more importantly, it's important for the kids to know. Because if the kids don't know their unique recipe for connecting with the world, how can they tell anybody else what it is? Because we cannot walk around our entire lives with somebody else over our shoulder saying, well, my child can't self-advocate because he has autism, so let me do all the talking for him. What happens when you die? Your child will be completely helpless. So you need to prepare the child with whatever tools they need. I don't care if your kid needs to spend the rest of their life carrying flashcards. If those cards say, this is my situation, this is what I need, if you can't help me, please direct me to someone who can. Because my 10-year-old, very intelligent, very articulate, had a speech delay up until he was 5, had a lot of speech education. I don't like speech therapy. Therapy begins with the premise that something's missing and something's broken, something's not good enough. So I like speech education. So he had a lot of speech education, but under those very sensorily overwhelming circumstances, he gets shy. He gets disorganized. It's hard for him to speak. It's hard for him to self-advocate. But that doesn't change the fact that he still knows what he needs. He just needs a more effective way to articulate it. So he came up with these little flashcards, took a little key ring, punched a hole in the corner, and put them all together. So in the classroom, if he says, I don't understand this, can you please explain it? He can show that card. He says, I'm getting overwhelmed, I need a sensory break. He shows the card. Of course, the harder part was getting the teacher to comply. But he had an effective tool that said exactly what he needed in that moment, and he was able to pick the card he needed and show it to whomever he needed to see it, even though he couldn't get his mouth to cooperate. So the tools are available. You just need to figure out what your needs are. What is your value? What experience do you need? And what do you need in order to accomplish it? But first and foremost, the child needs to know how to do it, or the adult, whoever it is you're working with. Make sense? Let's get into some strategy, shall we? Now, in the books that this wonderful organization made a point of getting for you free of charge, aren't they complete angels? Can I hear a big thank you? The strategies we're going to discuss for the remainder of the day are only scratching the surface to what's in that book. But the benefit of discussing them here today is you can ask questions. So please do. When you ask a book a question, it just gives you the same answer. But you can ask me questions here today. And the 5 here are the key strategies for being effective in relationships with anybody. I don't care what their challenges are. I don't care what gender they are. You can be more close, more connected, more effective, and virtually eliminate misunderstandings from those relationships if you master these primary strategies. Would you like that? Yeah. I hope so. The first strategy is feedback. Feedback answers the all-important question, how am I doing? Because when you're in a relationship with somebody else, you want to meet their needs. You want to contribute to their life. You want to make their life better. You need to know how effective you are at that. You need to know how you're doing. So you need information to answer that question. But let's say you're working with a young adult with some challenges. You're working with a small child. And what you're telling them is, you're doing it again. I've told you 1,000,000 times not to do that. You've made me mad. You're being inappropriate. That's disrespectful. What is that telling them about how they're doing? Is it telling them they're a great big screw-up? Is it telling them they have the potential to learn? Is it telling them how resourceful and resilient they are? It's telling them that they're a screw-up. And yet, unfortunately, the majority of the feedback kids with challenges get is criticism. All they hear is that they're screwing up. Now, who tends to be the most negative person in the world, and who do they tend to give the most negative feedback to? What's that? Yeah, you talking to you. You do something that was less than desirable, man, it was stupid. What were you thinking? Man, are you an idiot? And you're talking to yourself, not talking to anybody else. The number one critic in the world is the inner critic. So you'll tell somebody else, oh, come on, everybody makes mistakes. It's only human. But when you do it, man, are you a moron? You don't model the very thing you want to encourage other people to do. Anybody else do that? Criticize themselves? Never. Why do you do that? Any thoughts? Why do you beat up on yourself? Of all the things you could say to yourself, to answer the question, how am I doing? Why do you choose criticism? Is it motivating in some way? What does it motivate you to do? Not to do it again. Possibly. I mean, for some people, it absolutely could be the case that if you get angry enough at yourself for what you did, it will give you leverage to not do it again. The unfortunate other side of that is someone doesn't want to feel bad about it again, so they won't even make an effort to do it again. So there's no opportunity to improve upon it. But in essence, the reason we learn self-criticism is because somewhere along the line, someone taught us mistakes are bad. That if you make a mistake, you will get criticized. You will be judged, you'll be put down, somebody will be mad at you. So you learn you're bad if you do less than perfect. Someone else beats up on you, their voice gets in your head, and that's the one you start using every time you make a mistake. I mean, there's some things not as much as not as much as it used to be, but I'll be having a moment and I'll say, Mom, is that you? Because I hear a critical voice in my head and it sounds oddly familiar. But the more I learn, the more self-aware I get, the quieter that voice gets, because it has a lot less credibility, because my experience has been able to trump that old script. The inner critic is as toxic as it gets. The feedback needs to be that no matter what outcome you create, you did well, because you made something happen even if it wasn't the outcome you wanted. The feedback loop in your head needs to be in service of resilience. Okay, you fell down, get back up. The ultimate feedback strategy is what I call focusing on the forward, not the fall. That might actually be in there later, but I'm going to give it to you now. It's the same strategy I used with my then 7-year-old when he spilled the entire box of cereal on the floor. I wanted him to focus on the fact that although he had a less than perfect moment, that he can still create something meaningful from that, other than feeling bad about the fact that it didn't go the way he wanted. Yes? Which part? Because I'm on a bit of a tangent right now. Focus on the forward, not the fall. Which is, you fell down. Okay. Do you want to feel bad about the fact that you fell down? You want to feel ashamed that this never should have happened? If you were looking where you're going, if you were paying attention, if you were being careful, you never would have done this? That's celebrating the fall. What you want is to focus on resilience. Okay, you fell down, get back up. This is how you do it. So focusing on the forward instead of the fall, you simply acknowledge the fall occurred. All right, you tripped and fell. Okay, you accidentally spilled an entire box of cereal on the floor. Now what? You move it quickly into the solution. If you can do that with yourself, you can give that inner critic permanent laryngitis. You skip over any moment to beat yourself up. Feel bad, feel guilty. And simply say to yourself, all right, that went different. That's another reframe. Things don't go wrong, things don't go bad, they just go different. Because it's when you put that emotionally charged value judgment on it, that was bad, that went so wrong. When you use that kind of language, you get yourself stuck in that experience. So just tell yourself, well, that went different. Now what? What action can I take immediately to get myself back on track towards the outcome I wanted in the first place? Because the quicker you can get back up, the more resilient you are. And when you have kids that have a lot of challenges, that have an incredibly difficult time organizing, it's harder for them to get back up, so you want strategies that help them get there as fast as possible. Because it's too easy to stay down and get stuck and stay stuck. There was a hand back here?
I
Be open to outcome, not attached to outcome. What does that mean for you?
Be open to things the way things might not turn out you want it. Because something doesn't turn out the way you want it to, doesn't mean it's a negative outcome.
Right. Just because it turned out the way you want doesn't mean it's negative. What is it? It's feedback. If it didn't go the way you wanted, it's still information. So that was just another way of saying it can go the way you wanted or it can go different. However it goes is feedback. It tells you, how am I doing? Well, I took these specific steps. I had this intended outcome. I took these steps. What feedback did I get? Different. All right, so these steps did not give me the outcome I was looking for. What do I need to do instead? I'll do something else. Okay, I'll try that. Did it work out the way I wanted to? No. Okay, now I need to do something else. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Because it's not wrong. It's not bad. It's feedback. And if you can have that specific belief, let's say your value is you want to feel successful. You want to feel effective. But your belief is, if I take action and I get feedback, I'm successful. Because if any information you get is useful, if any information is feedback, anytime you take action, anytime you create results, you are successful. Because you're in action, you're in motion. You're not instead paralyzed by fear because you want it to go right every single time. It has to be perfect or I'm a failure. If you have those beliefs, you will not take action. You'll live in fear. Now, in terms of feedback in communication, feedback in relationships, in order to know how you're doing, how effective you are at being a friend, a teacher, a colleague, a spouse, you must be able to talk to each other. Otherwise, you keep doing the same annoying thing over and over again. The other person doesn't want to tell you what it is. They're hoping you'll figure it out because of the frown on your face or little other passive-aggressive things you're doing because you're mad at them. Or you're thinking they should just know, and if they don't know, that they're being immature, they're being willful, they're being spiteful, they're being selfish. And nowhere along the way did you ever communicate to them that what they're doing is not effective for you. But you must have some kind of mechanism in your relationship to be open, honest, and straightforward with each other. You need to have a mechanism for feedback. Because you've got to nip these annoyances in the bud. And more importantly, if something's happening that's working for you, you want it to continue. If something really makes you feel loved, really makes you feel significant, you want it to keep happening that way. Because if you don't give the person that feedback, the way they need the feedback, they'll think it didn't work and they'll stop doing it. And then one day you'll say, remember that thing you started doing, and why did you stop that? Well, I didn't know that was working for you. Well, couldn't you just tell? No, you didn't say anything. Oh, I shouldn't have to say anything. Are we seeing the rules conflict in that conversation? So there are 4 steps for negotiating feedback into a relationship. The first one is you need to agree that feedback is absolutely necessary for a healthy relationship. You as a partnership, again, spouse, parent-teacher, teacher-student, colleagues, you need to agree that unless there is feedback present in your relationship can't remain healthy and it can't grow. So that's the first thing. The second one is you need to agree to what you'll give feedback on. Case in point, I often monologue in social situations. I get nervous, I get on a topic that I like, and I will just talk on and on and on and on. I know that creates issues. So between my wife and I, she and I have an agreement that she will give me feedback on monologuing. So if she gives me feedback on that, I'm ready for it because we've agreed to it. Okay? So the third one is agree to how the feedback will be given. When, where, and how. So I've agreed to receive feedback on monologuing. But I need to have some quality control on how it's given to me so I'm not embarrassed by it. Because feedback needs to be useful. You don't want to get defensive. You don't want your feelings hurt. So she's not going to say, honey, will you shut up? That's not helpful feedback when I'm monologuing. I don't feel supported. If anything, it's going to tick me off. So the fourth step in negotiating feedback is agree to how each of you will respond when you're given the feedback. Okay? So first we agreed that it's absolutely necessary. Because in terms of how am I doing, I want to do what's going to make our relationship work, how we're going to stay connected, how we're going to grow. Next, I need to know what's working and what's not working. So if there are specific things we need to agree to feedback on, we need to agree to those specific topics. Then we need to agree to how are we going to let each other know what's working and not working. So in terms of the monologuing, what we did agree to is that she would just say, honey, I think so-and-so has a question. I think so-and-so wanted to say something. And when she says that to me in that way, I know it means I've been monologuing. And because she did it in such a respectful way, I receive it with gratitude. Because in terms of how you respond to the feedback, you must agree to accept it with gratitude. Not hostility, not resentment, not bitterness, or you will never get feedback again. Because why would you be upset with somebody who did the very thing you asked them to do? They kept their agreement. You're raising a hand or stretching? Itching, even better. Just 4 steps for agreeing to how are you going to let each other know how you're doing in a relationship. And if something comes up, something new, and there is no conversation, there's no agreement around it, you can simply say, something has happened in our relationship lately that, is kind of new, and I'd like to give you some feedback on it. Are you ready to hear it? And if they say, well, now is not a good time, can we talk about it a little bit later? Sure, when? Schedule for like an hour or so. That way the person can get ready for the fact that they're maybe about to hear something that they don't want to hear. Because even though it's something new, because you haven't negotiated how it's going to be given to you yet, it might be a little rough around the edges. But because you have made that essential first agreement, that feedback is critical in your relationships, you're okay and open with feedback. And then as you get new information on what this new issue is, you begin to negotiate. Someone says, well, it really bugs me when you do this. Okay, I understand that. If you said it this way, I'd hear it better. Are you comfortable giving it to me that way? Sure, that works. As long as when I say it this way, you know it means this. Okay, we agree to that. Now you disagree to the language. Okay, when does a specific thing happen? What happens in these situations? Okay, so what happens in that situation, this is how you need to let me know so I maintain my dignity when it occurs. Is this making sense? 4 steps. That's it. Any questions about feedback? Anybody have in mind the exact person they're going to do this with when they go home today? The next strategy is clarification. The opposite of clarification is assumption. Assumption is when the person says, well, you should just know. I shouldn't have to tell you. You should be able to read my mind. Assumption is that misbelief that you can read what somebody else is thinking. You know their intentions. You know their beliefs. You don't need to ask them a darn thing. You can read between the lines. I always hear this lousy advice that the important part of listening is to hear what's unspoken. That's garbage. You need to get the other person to verbalize it. Because if they don't tell it to you, it ain't there. You are assuming facts that are not in evidence. They don't say it, it isn't there. Someone says, you don't read between the lines. I said, because I don't write anything there. I write it on the line. That's what I pay attention to. When you do clarify with someone, well, let me ask you this. Do you clarify? Anybody do that? What does it even mean? Because I'm sure you've said it. I just want to clarify. I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I'm sure you've used the word, but what does it mean to you? Yes. Okay, so for clarification, you'll say back to them the words they used to make sure you heard the words they were using. Important first step. Okay, in the right way?
Well, just that I'm understanding what they meant. So,
Ah, there you go. So it's more than understanding the words they used. It's also making sure you understand what they meant with those words. Because clarification requires that you share a meaning in common. That it meant what they felt it meant instead of what you heard it meant. Does this sound familiar? Oh, I know what you meant. I heard what you said. No, you can't take it back now. No, don't change your words. I know what you meant. Okay, so what you're telling me is you are defending your filter. You filtered it through some baggage that you have that has nothing to do with the way that I meant it. But you're insisting your filter was more correct than what I actually meant. How crazy does it make you when that happens? I know what I meant. You need to make sure and clarify that the way you meant it is the way that was received. On the bottom of that page, you're going to see a little chart. There's certain habits that people have that sabotage clarification. There's no chart? Was there some faux pas with the printer? Yes, when it printed, something went different. Thank you for that. Well, I can tell you what these steps are, and I can very easily send something to Angie, and she can send it off to you. So listen closely. The first saboteur of clarification, as we discussed, is assumption. And essentially, assumption is you think you know what somebody else is thinking and what they meant without them telling you. It's your belief and your gift of mind reading. The second saboteur is projection. Projection is when you think somebody else is thinking what you're thinking. You say, well, of course you agree with me. Why wouldn't you? It's like you don't even check in with them. It says, oh, I don't need to ask their permission. I know that they'll be okay with it. Because why wouldn't they be? That's what I think, and I'm right. That's projection. Then self-importance. I shouldn't have to repeat myself. You should have been listening the first time. Whoever does that. Self-importance. See, she just did it to me. I shouldn't have to repeat myself. You should have been paying attention the entire time. You have no right to tune out ever because every word I utter is gold. I know you see that in the classroom sometimes, right? You see it at work. You can be talking to your best friend and you're just tired, or something they said to you makes you think about something else and your mind just wanders. It's not a sign of disrespect. It's something your mind simply does. But if somebody asks you to repeat yourself, you know what they're actually doing? They're actually saying to you that they care enough about what you were saying that they want you to repeat it. But very seldom is it heard that way. Through the insecure, self-important mind, being asked to repeat yourself is often heard as, you didn't care enough about me to give me undivided attention. And that's just not correct. So that self-importance sabotages the opportunity for clarification to take place. And the fourth saboteur is ego strength. And ego strength refers to the fact that you are afraid to ask for clarification because you're afraid the other person would be mad at you. if you do. Because one of these other things will happen. They'll say, I shouldn't have to repeat myself. If you really cared about me, you'd have been paying attention in the first place. Or if someone says, you should just know what I'm thinking. You shouldn't have to ask me. You clearly don't know me well enough. You clearly don't love me. They get mad at you for asking for clarification. That's the number one reason why people don't clarify. Because someone else will get mad at them. So what do they do to protect themselves from the anger? They assume instead. Ever find yourself getting stuck in that pattern? It's safer to assume just to have them get mad at you later because you assumed, and then they'll say, you should, if you didn't understand, you should have asked me the first time. Of course, they're conveniently forgetting that they just would have gotten mad at you then because you weren't listening closely enough when they explained the first time. So all of these saboteurs to clarification. So let's talk about the steps to clarification. How do you get clarification into your relationship? Well, like with feedback, you need to believe that clarification is absolutely necessary to the health of your relationship. You must realize that neither of you is psychic. Mind reading does not happen. You need to be able to check in with each other and clarify meaning. And after you've agreed that it's absolutely essential, the second step is you need to agree to do it. Because you might say, oh, I'm sorry, I should have clarified. Next time I'll clarify. You both need to agree that you are going to clarify. So that way when someone says, okay, let me tell you what I just heard, and you say the words back, and then you ask, okay, is this what you meant by that? Because you have the agreement in place that you're going to do that, there should be no surprise on the other side when you do it. The third step to clarification is asking 360-degree questions, which means you cover all the bases. Who, what, when, why, and how. Because those are the main facts. Okay, who are we talking about? Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to do it? Why am I doing this again? What am I going to do when I get there? Because when you're thinking about what information you're going to give somebody, it's really easy to leave stuff out. So it's important that you cover all those bases in your head before you even open your mouth. What do they need to know? Who is it about? What do I need them to do? What do I need to tell them? Where do they need to go? Why do they need to go there? How do they need to do it? So you put it all out there. And when you're hearing somebody say something to you, you can say, okay, give me a minute. I want to make sure I heard everything. And you can run through your mind everything you just heard and see if all those bases were covered. Because the fourth step to clarification is to understand what action is now going to be taken based on this conversation. Because when you have a conversation with something, or with somebody rather, why are you having that conversation in the first place? Is it for the heck of it? Any conversation that you have, it's because you want one of three things to happen. You want a person to think differently than they thought before, feel differently, or take a specific action. So you need to know that you've been effective. So you need to know what specific action, what specific feeling. Like, for example, when it comes to focusing on the forward and not the fall. I want to know that the takeaway my child had from that situation is he understand that he just solved a problem. He realizes that he can do it next time. So I'll ask him, what'd you learn here? Well, I learned that, it's okay to make mistakes. Okay. So he's having a specific thought about the situation. So how do you feel about that? Did it work out for you? Do you feel mad at yourself? A little bit. Do you feel anything else about yourself? I feel proud. Why do you feel proud? Because I solved the problem. Okay, he's had a very specific feeling. I want to clarify that. So if this ever happens again, what do you think you can do? I can clean it up. Okay, so there's a specific action he can take. So I want to clarify that one of those specific changes has taken place. Because if you give a person a lot of information and you say, do you understand? Uh-huh. You haven't clarified squat. You don't know any thinking has changed, no feeling has changed, and no specific action is going to be taken. Until you know one of those things has occurred, clarification has not occurred. Does that make sense? Because if you don't clarify one of those changes, you say, okay, me and your dad are going to leave for a while. I need you to clean up your room. You understand? Uh-huh. While they're playing the video games. When you come back, it's not done. I thought I told you what to do. You told me you understood. Uh-huh. No, they understood that words came out of your mouth and then you left. Unless there is an agreement, a clarification of meaning, the words that were exchanged, and what specific action will be taken by when. That's the point of the 360-degree questions. Who's going to do it? What are you going to do? When are you going to do it? Why are you going to do it? How are you going to do it? When they agree to every nut and bolt, you know they are paying attention. You make agreements to every single one of those. Then you know you have clarification. Then if they don't do it, it's much easier to dish out a consequence. Because they can't claim ignorance on every single point. Well, you didn't say when. You didn't see by the time you got home. Darn it, I missed the when. And they got you. So you ask yourself those questions so you cover every single base. Make sense? Any questions on either feedback or clarification? Okay? Next strategy, negotiation. Negotiation is an agreement of how to do us. What are the rules we are going to agree to for how our relationship is going to work? And agreements are the glue of any relationship. What is allowed in our relationship and what better not happen. Every relationship you're in right now, including all the stuff you can't stand, those things only happen because you agreed to it. Either openly or passively. If someone gets a right to break wind in public and embarrass you, why do they do that? Because you allow it. You've agreed to it. If someone gets to insult you when they're angry, and then they apologize later, and you say, oh, it's okay. I forgive you. You're agreeing to those steps. You get to insult me, you get to apologize, and I'll let you off the hook with no consequences. You agree to that pattern. But then you go and tell your friend, I wish he'd stop doing that. I wish he'd stop talking disrespectfully to me. Or I wish she would stop calling me an idiot when I do something she doesn't like. If it happens, it's because you've agreed to it. And we talked about trust earlier over here. Somebody values trust. The number one way to establish and maintain trust in relationships is to honor the agreements you've made. If you agree to treat each other a certain way and you consistently do so, you've demonstrated yourself as trustworthy. Because you make an agreement and you stick to it. Now, there are four main agreements that exist in every relationship. The first agreement is that you're actually in a partnership. The second agreement is whether the partnership is win-win, win-lose, or lose-lose. Because there are some people that say, well, I want both of us to succeed. I want us to work together, while the other person has decided that your relationship is a competition, where they feel they've only won if you lose. What's a bullying relationship? Is that win-win? That's win-lose. Come on, can't we just be friends? No, get away from me, loser. You're trying to negotiate a win-win when they insist upon a win-lose. So it's essential to know what is the power dynamic. The third agreement is what is the agreed upon outcome? Why are we in this relationship? Well, to be friends. What does that mean? So we have fun together. Okay, fun's an outcome. I want to be with somebody who understands me. Okay, being understood is an outcome. When you understand what values you're going after together. Why are we together? Well, I like to have conversations. I like to watch movies. Okay, those are kind of outcomes too. If you agree that the reasons you get together is to do this stuff, and you maintain those agreements, all right, you've got a partnership to create those outcomes. The fourth agreement is, what is the process for achieving that outcome? Okay, we're going to have fun. How do we do it? Well, I like to go on roller coasters. I like to watch horror movies. Okay, where our outcome is fun, but we have very different ideas about how to do that. So if we can't agree on the process, it's going to be very difficult for us to have a relationship and to have an effective partnership. Because for some person, oh, I enjoy nature. For one person, it might be going and walking through flower gardens. Another person might be hiking through the desert. But you said you like nature. Not like that. It's because my wife and I have had a conversation about camping. And I'm glad we defined what that meant. I think about camping as you're in a tent, you're out in the open with some of the elements. Her idea is you are at a state park in an air-conditioned cabin with a fridge. So we need to agree to that process, or we are not going to be able to accomplish fun and connection with nature. So you not only need to negotiate the partnership overall, but you need to negotiate it contextually as well. How are we partners on a dinner date? How are we partners at Thanksgiving with the family? How are we partners in parenting? I can't tell you how many messed up kids have been created by inconsistency in parenting. Because there are two completely conflicting rule sets when it comes to how you parent, how you discipline. Anybody else experience this? They may each be very reasonable in their own right, but they're not done by both people. So what you end up doing is raising a very confused child who does not know what the rules are. Well, my child is very impulsive. My child is very reactive. My child's always losing their temper. Does either one of you do that? He does. And sometimes, he will own it. And then he'll turn and look at his wife and say, well, she's too permissive. She lets a kid get away with anything. Well, it's because I want her to understand that, nobody is perfect and it's okay to make mistakes, and I don't want her to feel bad about herself. Then the other person doesn't see the learning happening fast enough, gets impatient, and then says, you screwed up again. How many times do we need to tell you, don't listen to your mother. She just wants you to get away with everything. I want to teach you to be a responsible adult. Okay, so am I supposed to be a responsible adult, feel bad about what I did, or am I supposed to feel like it's okay to be a human being and not feel bad about it? So the mother negotiates one partnership with the child, the father negotiates a second partnership, and the child is confused. Make sense? Everybody hitting their saturation point? I can kind of see it. Hand back there.
I have a question about negotiation.
Okay.
How do you feel about rewards?
Ooh, she just opened Pandora's box. How do I feel about reward systems? Well, let me, guys, ask you that question first. How do you feel about reward systems? Oh, that was an easy answer. That can be positive or negative. Give me an example of either. It can be bribery, absolutely. Okay. So if you use it to get a change in behavior, but you don't need to use it forever.
Even if it actually changes,
Mm-hmm.
they realize that if they do all their chores,
So we look back to the beginning of the day, the total experience cycle. You can change behavior but not change thinking and feeling. So one of the difficulties I've seen long term with that is because you have an external reward, nothing about the thinking and feeling needs to change. Because it's simply a means to an end, simply to change behavior. I will give you a sticker, I will give you a token, I'll give you some money, whatever it is. And it also is it meets an immediate need instead of something long-term more substantial. Because the ultimate measure of any kind of token system, reward system, is when they do something because there's a relationship value attached to it. In other words, you do this thing that I've asked you to do because one of our agreements in a partnership is that we respect each other's needs. And when you do this, it helps meet this need for me. So it's relationship driven, not carrot driven. You follow me? Because there was a scenario that I was asked to consult on. A young man was in a behavioral school, an ED-BD school, and he'd been earning his points all day long, and he did something inappropriate. So he took his points away for the day and he attacked his aide, violently attacked his aide. And when I picked apart what the heck happened there, what I was able to help them determine is that the main relationship they were helping him build was a relationship between him and the points. The relationship with the people didn't matter. The people were a means to an end. They were a means to him getting points. He valued the points, not the people. So there was no reward within that system that was relationship driven. He didn't care about them, he cared about the points. They had it completely backwards. So what they essentially did was deprived him of his best friend. You took my points away? How dare you? It never occurred to them that's what they were doing. The bottom line is, in life, none of our needs get met without each other. So the reward needs to be something within the relationship. Time, attention. I will give you of my resources. So the rewards for my older boy likes his video games. He needs money to get his video games. If he does specific things for me, I'll give him some money so he can go and get his video game. But he must do right by me first. It's not like you're doing a chore and therefore the chore is the means to an end. You're doing the chore because it helps me. It's because you're meeting a need for me. It's about me and him. It's not about the chore. You see the difference? So the leverage needs to be about the relationship, not about the thing. That's the kind of token system that needs to be driving all of these. So long as it's an external carrot that has nothing to do with people, it runs the risk of turning people into valuing objects and things and not people. One of the ways you do it is through the feedback you give them. Like with my son, I can say, you know, I really feel respected by you when you do this for me. It was really helpful for me right now when you did that, and I really appreciate it. You were very helpful to do this for me. You use a lot of language that speaks to who they are and speaks to their character, and you also speak to the value they gave you. Like, you were very helpful right now when you did this for me, and I really appreciate it. So you're giving them feedback, letting them know how they're doing, as opposed to, good job at completing your test on time, good job of turning in the assignment. You give them feedback that says you did a good job at turning in the paper. What if you said, I'm so grateful that when I gave the deadline for this paper, you respected me enough to turn it in on time as asked. I really appreciate you when you do that. Do you see you're commenting on the same event, but one was task-oriented, one was relationship-oriented. So you need to have a conversation that's relationship-oriented. That's how you change the focus on what the outcome is. Because it's got to be about the people. Otherwise, they don't learn to care about people. Did that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions about that? Okay. Here, then here. You never withhold a relationship. You don't say, if you don't do this, I'm never going to love you. The feedback you give is always that we're right here, we're going to connect, but this is how it needs to happen to work. For instance, a kid gets mad and says, I hate you, I'm going to cut your head off, I'm going to kill you. You can say, that's inappropriate, go to your room, don't talk to me. That's withholding a relationship. That's a form of emotional abandonment, even though I can fully appreciate a parent being shocked by that language. However, if your outcome is to give that child feedback to allow them to be more effective in communicating their relationships, then you hang in there and you say, you know what, I can tell you're upset. I really know that you want to tell me something, but the words you're using right now makes it really difficult for me to understand you. So if there's something you really want to tell me, we need to figure out a way for you to do it. Because my now 10-year-old, when he was younger, he used to chew my wife up and spit her out. He'd say stuff that brought her to tears, only because he was mad and didn't get what he wanted. So I sat him down and we did an intensive negotiation where I basically asked him, were you mad when she didn't give you what you wanted? Yes, I was mad. Okay, why didn't you say that? Well, I wanted her to, feel bad. I wanted her to hurt too. Okay, and what did that get you? Got me in trouble. Is that what you wanted? Did you want to get in trouble? No. What did you want? I wanted her to know I was mad. Okay. So what you did decide to say got you in trouble. You said you didn't want that. What you wanted her to know is you were mad. So try that right now. Tell me you're mad. I'm mad. Okay, thank you so much for telling me about it. I understand that. I don't understand that you want to burn the house down. I don't understand that you want to stab me in the chest with a knife. You tell me you're mad? I get that. Thank you. So I just told him he was effective. I'm still connected. I'm still in there with him. The relationship is never at stake. What's at stake is how effectively we connect in this moment. Not whether or not we connect, how effectively we do it. So I spent about 45 minutes with him. And after that intense negotiation where I just kept helping him realize that everything he was doing was not getting him the outcome he wanted, now whenever we tell him no, he says, okay. Where in the past he would have completely melted down on us. Now that's, of course, a real complex process to teach. There are some parents, it takes a couple months for them to get this because it's a paradigm shift. Because you have to move from reactivity to proactivity, to being very clear on your outcomes in very intense situations. Because some parents have beliefs that under no circumstances can you disrespect me, and you disrespect me when you talk like this. Then as soon as that happens, it pushes a button, they blow their caps, and they blow the opportunity. So there's a lot of belief and value shifts that need to take place for that to work. But I'm glad you brought that up. It's a very important point. Okay? Over here. Okay? There's never a moment that I've ever experienced where the connectivity isn't there. Mm-hmm. Can you give me an example of that? Okay? When you tell them next time you're mad, tell me you're mad, you need to get them doing it. So if you were going to tell me how you're mad, how would you do it? Everything he's doing now, any pattern a person has worked into, is because they are wired into that pattern. The total experience cycle, thought, feeling, physiology, action. If you want him to do something new, he needs to do it all. You follow me? So if you value, tell me when you're mad, what would you think? What would you feel? How would you hold your body? How would you do it? You need to, almost like you were having him rehearse a play. You need to get him up doing everything he'd be doing in that moment. He needs to do it so much that he forgets the old way of doing it. And for some kids, you need to do more. It needs to be a more intense experience of the new way to wire it in their nervous system. Otherwise, we're always going to slide back to the old setting. Because simply having a conversation about it, saying, tell me, what would you do next time? You're only hitting one part of the 4-part cycle. You need to remember it. That's purely intellectual. Where's the feeling? Where's the physiology? You follow me? You got to get his whole being involved in it if you're going to rewire that pattern. So for some kids, it's a lot harder work. It takes more, but you can make the shift. Make sense? A little bit. And my explaining it to you is going to be harder because I'm just telling you. I'm not showing it to you. And we can have a little bit more of a conversation about it later. But if you think about it, there's a belief about what's essential for the relationship. Because if he says, I want you to feel how I'm feeling, okay? What he's essentially feeling is, I want to negotiate a lose-lose relationship with you. I feel bad, so I want you to feel bad too. If he actually wants to feel better, part of his belief shift needs to be, I want to communicate to you that I want to feel better than I do. And then I want to recruit you to help me feel better. So that's why the belief shift, it's not just a matter of changing a technique, telling me you're mad. His essential belief is your partnership needs to be lose-lose for him to feel like he's effective. So that's an essential component of that too. Beliefs and values. So all these pieces we're discussing today, you need to bring all that into that situation in order to change it, especially with somebody who has that many challenges. You need to work even harder and get them at an even deeper level because the neurology is wired in such a unique way, okay? So you and I will spend a week together and I'll teach you all this, the finer points. It sounds like a win-lose, my friend. Okay? I put here in the strategy for focus on the forward, not the fall, but we discussed that earlier. So we'll move into asking for help, self-advocacy. Now, someone actually spoke to me earlier about her young adult child having extreme difficulty with self-advocacy, accepting help, asking for help. Now, I imagine she's the only one that has this experience. Is this pretty common? So what's the big deal with asking for help? This is strategy 5, yes. Asking for help. 4 was focus on the forward, not the fall, but we talked about that earlier. See, you're already self-advocating and we haven't even started yet. That's beautiful. So why don't people ask for help? It's so easy, isn't it? Just ask for what you want, right? I sat in an IEP meeting where we were trying to explain to the teachers why it's difficult for a young man to ask for help. One of the teachers actually said, how hard can it be? You just raise your hand. And he was serious. And of course, this was the teacher this kid has the biggest problem with. So what's the big deal about asking for help? It's really easy to do, right? How do you do it? How do you ask for help? Yes? Raise your hand. And that's why all of you have been doing that all day long. How else do you ask for help? Yes? Okay. Admitting you don't know anything and admitting that you might be wrong. Is there a belief in there someplace? Is there a belief that says if I don't know, there's something wrong with me? If I don't know, I'm dumb? And if I ask for help, I'm letting everybody know it? So is the issue asking for help? Or is the issue that there's a limiting belief that tells you if you do ask for help, it means something's wrong with you? Is that the bigger issue? And where do we learn that? That not knowing is bad? Maybe you get some feedback in a very common environment, say a classroom. If you don't know an answer to a question when you're called upon by the teacher, what kind of feedback do you get? What's that? Other kids will laugh at you. What are you, stupid? Sometimes the teacher gets on your case. You weren't listening. Exactly. Oh, that's wrong. The feedback that you get tells you you just messed up because you didn't know. Ignorance, not knowing, is something to be ashamed of. And if that's the feedback you get, why on earth would you ever admit to not knowing something? Because the prevailing opinion of others is that not knowing means you're bad, stupid, wrong. You learn that at an early age. And then after that's been embedded into your psyche, someone comes along and says, oh, everybody asks questions. Everybody needs help sometime. But that can't compete with the emotionally charged memory of being embarrassed in front of your classmates. You know what I found is one of the best ways to switch that paradigm in a child? Ask for help from your kids. Be vulnerable in front of them. Ask for their expertise. Ask them to guide you. When they see you doing it, they will learn that there's a different way to approach that situation. Ask my kids for help all the time. Even if it's something I already know. Because I'm just looking for a clarification and verification. Because one of my sons, my middle boy, is really big into animals. He knows a lot about lizards. So I'll go and find a fact about it and say, can I ask your opinion on something? I know you know a lot about this. I was just reading this thing up about, the bearded dragon, and I just want to check in with you and see if I got this right. Yeah, that's right. Oh, thank you so much, because I wasn't sure, if it was correct information. So I want to check in with you because you're really good at this stuff. So thank you so much for helping me understand it. He just witnessed me be vulnerable, not know something, be okay with it, and seek him out so that he could feel like he was an authority. He was contributing to my life. I helped him feel significant because he had something of value to contribute to me. So not only was I modeling self-advocacy and asking for help, I was also meeting some of his 6 essential needs as well. In one conversation. Isn't it nice how that works out? The way to teach it is to model it. Because many years ago when I first started working with a spectrum population, and parents began asking me a lot, how do I teach my child the importance of asking for help? And of course I stumbled across this stuff where, I don't want to look stupid. Kids who don't know are stupid. I don't want to look bad. But I also found that a lot of them didn't even consider it an option. That they were so disconnected from everybody else around them that they thought that all solutions resided with them. If they couldn't solve it all by themselves without the help from anybody else, there was no solution. It simply couldn't be done. Because they had such difficulty connecting with other people that it was considered more painful to ask for help than it was to try it 2,000 times until you got sick of trying. So sometimes the issue isn't that they won't ask for it. Sometimes the situation is it never occurred to them that it was an option. So in all cases, the first step in asking for help is to know that you need it. Know that there's a problem. Know something isn't working. The second step in asking for help is to know what form you need it. We talked about this earlier with learning styles. Do you need it shown to you visually? Do you need it explained to you auditorily? You need to do it once. You need someone to demonstrate it. Let me watch you do it once, and then I'll do it. You can watch me and let me know if I did it right. Because let's say you know you need it, then you say, I need help. And you're that vague about it. Then the person comes up to you and says, okay, let me explain it to you. They tell you. Was that helpful? Yeah. And they go away, and you're no better off than before you asked them. And because it didn't make sense to you, you learn in that moment that guess what? Asking for help got me nowhere because that person just confused me more. Because you didn't know the form you needed it in, so you couldn't ask for it. The third step is, who do you need it from? I got this funny pain in my side. I'm going to call my accountant. He watches the Discovery Channel. So I know I need it. I know what form I need it, but I asked the wrong person. I've come across so many situations where kids want all of their answers to come from their comfort person. They want their mom or their dad to know everything about their special interests, and if they don't, their parents have failed them. Kid is a total ace in World War II. Dad's an auto mechanic. I was reading something about some decision some general made during a battle and says, Dad, why do you think General so-and-so did this? His dad says, heck if I know. Why don't you know? You're supposed to know. Why should I know anything about that? Don't you care about me? You don't care about anything I like. Turns into a big fight. Kid knew he needed help. He knew what form he needed it in. He asked the wrong person. He needs to find somebody who's an expert on World War II to ask, because that help is available. The fourth step is, how do you ask for it? Run into this a lot at the college level with kids, because not all professors are equally available. Some have regular office hours. Some will say, stop by after class. Some will say, send me an email. Some will say, lend me a voicemail. So if someone says, well, the teacher likes to, let's leave a voicemail, but I don't like using the phone. Good luck accessing your teacher. Because of that little sticking point in the way you operate, you are denying yourself help. Is I don't like the phone. Or I won't prioritize making an appointment with my instructor after class. The teacher has told you, this is how you ask me for help. This is how you access me. If you have made a decision to not access the teacher that way, you cannot blame the teacher for not getting the help that you need. Or if you simply assume that the way you want to ask for help is the way the other person should or must give it to you, that causes problems too. Well, I'm just going to send my teacher an email, and because I check my email every 10 minutes on my smartphone, it means the teacher does exactly the same thing. What you don't realize is the teacher maybe checks their email once a week. And by then, the question you need an answer to, the opportunity has come and gone, and now your project is late or it's not done correctly, and you say, teacher's a jerk, teacher didn't respond to my email. Well, you didn't find out from the teacher what is the most effective way to ask for the help. Make sense? Fifth step, is it the right time? In so many situations, it's a timing issue. I learned this during my earlier career, before I learned my kids were on the spectrum, before I learned I had some of those issues, where I would just walk up to somebody and start asking my question. I wouldn't say, good morning, how are you doing? I would just walk up and start talking. And somebody, I can't remember how old I was, but it was in one of those teachable moments where I realized what I had done. Because I walked up to somebody and started asking a question, and she stood back and says, well, good morning to you too. So I kind of paused and said, I think I was supposed to do something different here. So I paused for a moment and I said, good morning, how are you today? She said, well, I'm just fine, how are you? And I said, I have a question to ask you. Is now a good time? She says, no, I'm really busy right now. Can you come back in about 20 minutes? So in that single exchange, she taught me that principle. To first greet someone and ask them if now is a good time to get help from them. Because I knew that I needed the help. I knew what information I was lacking. I knew what form I needed it in. I needed her to tell me. I knew who I needed it from, her. I thought I knew how to ask for it. She corrected me on that. But even if all those are correct, got the first four nailed, if now is not the right time, I can't get it then. Because there are plenty of people who have all four, the first four nailed, and the person will say, you know what, not right now, I'm busy. And they hear that as no. They hear it as rejection, and they go away. You told me to go and ask so-and-so for help, and that person didn't help me. Well, did you ask whether now was a good time? Because often, that's the only thing that's missing. This person is perfectly capable, ready, willing, and able to help you, but not right now. Maybe in 5, 10, 30 minutes. So it's critical once you know what you need, who you need it from, in what form you need it. You step up and say, excuse me a moment, I have something to ask you. Is now a good time? That's your first question. Oh yes, now is a good time. What's your question? Or no, not right now, I'm just on my way out. Can we set up a time to meet at my office? Can you send me an email? Can you call me later this evening? Then I'll be happy to help you. Because often it's simply a timing issue. But if the assumption is, I need help now, you need to give it now, and if the person doesn't give it now, you get impatient, you blame them, you're mad at them, you say, you are not helpful, you didn't help me, you let me down. When actually there was nothing wrong with that scenario except that your belief that you should drop everything and make me the highest priority didn't sync with this person's right to postpone giving you help until it's more convenient for them. Again, a little rules conflict that can create complete disconnect between you getting the help you need from somebody else. Questions, comments, complete looks of confusion. Yes. What? No. Now, got some interesting nonverbal just now. You're kind of gritting your teeth as, do I really want to ask this question?
So, as far as early intervention, like the younger population, what do you think about, like, if there's like a behavioral stuff that you were talking about, and all that was obviously more geared towards an older child. So what about younger children, like, that can't have these Western conversations like that? Would you maybe a nonverbal child or somebody who's just 3 years old?
Well, the first thing you need to establish, because she was asking about what do you do with an early intervention kid, especially if it's nonverbal, it's younger. The 3 things you need to establish with a child, nonverbal or not, do you like it or dislike it? And what do you want? Because a lot of times a kid can point. My nephew, he's 2 years old, and my older brother says, well, I got a little bit of that Asperger stuff. He's got a lot of it, okay? So his little boy seems a little speech delayed. And he would always scream when he wanted something. He would scream at the top of his lungs. And what was the feedback he was getting? Stop screaming, knock it off, you're misbehaving. Everybody else was doing this and he was just screaming loud and loud. Then he would start hitting. Don't hit. There was one question not being asked of this child. What question do you think that was? What do you want? So when I was seeing him do this, I would just, for a while I had decided I am not my family's therapist. I cannot ethically intervene. But we were at holiday and he was just blowing his top. He wouldn't stop screaming. So at one point I just walked over. I got down eye level after he was screaming for about 20 minutes and everybody's telling him to stop screaming. I just looked at him and said, what do you want? He pointed to the top of the fridge. He was hungry and wanted some chips. Got his chips and stopped screaming. So I sat down and gave my brother and his wife a lecture on everything they were missing, what it means when he does that, what they need to do from now on, lesson over. Because little kids can tell you, I like it, I don't like it. They can nod, they can shake their head, they can point. Start that simple. Because you get them tuned in to their own internal feedback. What's working, what's not working. What do I like, what do I not like? And simple ways to communicate that to you. Then the more complex things like this you get into as they mature. Okay? Was there a hand over here? Yes.
Relates to the timing step.
Mm-hmm.
What would you suggest for a person with an autism spectrum disorder who has kind of some issues with that timing and with understanding that the other person is busy right now? And I work with young ladies for example, and it's very hard to communicate. There's
So you have a young lady on the spectrum who doesn't understand that somebody might be busy right now because maybe she's missing something about what they're doing, some nonverbal communication. That's why you teach her the rule. Those 5 steps I just gave you, that's the checklist that somebody can literally, if they need to, walk around on a little index card saying, okay, I need help. What do I need to do here to get it? So if she needs that prompt card, give it to her. Because if you're expecting her to read from somebody else, she might not. She might not get it, especially if she's very egocentric and all she's thinking about is the fact that she wants it and she wants it now because that's her rule. But if you give her the cheat sheet, that trumps it. My 14-year-old, to this day, oftentimes he will come up to me and he'll just start asking for something. And I'll look at him and say, am I doing anything right now? Oh, sorry. And sometimes he'll remember. Say, do you have a minute? I want to ask you something. Say, oh, thank you so much for asking that. Actually, I need to finish what I'm doing right now. Can you come back in 15 minutes? Okay. So I reinforce it when he does it. But he doesn't always remember the rule. So if he needs a little cheat sheet, he's going to get it. Some of the strategies that I do, like the social disclaimer. Like one of the social disclaimers that I use is I know that I don't read nonverbal cues very well. So one of the clarification strategies is, you know what, I want to make sure that I understood you correctly. Or if somebody changes their expression, I don't know whether they got anxious or frustrated. I'll just say, let me check in with you. Can you tell me what you heard me say just now? Well, honestly, what you said just kind of upset me. Oh, thank you so much for telling me that. What about that was upsetting to you? Because I asked them to clarify meeting to let me know whether they had an emotional response, because I don't always catch it. Because there's a push out there to say, read the facial cues chart. You need to know what feelings they're having. We're not always going to catch it. Some of us won't catch it at all. All we need to know is that somebody's emotions might change in response to what we do or say. So the strategy we need is a clarification strategy to get them to tell us. You see that? So she might not be able to look and see if somebody's busy. What she needs is some strategy to remind her that the person might be busy, so that she then remembers to check in with them to see if in fact they are. So this strategy of is it the right time, that's her little mental checklist to go through before she even asks them. Is that helpful? It's not perfect, but it's an improvement over what she's already doing. Okay? Any other questions? Okay. One last thing. Okay. And then we'll just go straight Q&A, or you can run to the bathroom, you can give me a high five, standing ovation, whatever it is you feel compelled to do. Okay. I call this the legacy question, or the legacy exercise. We've talked about a lot today. One of the things that's come up repeatedly is how you model, the example you set, the impact you're going to have on the lives of everybody around you, the unique gifts that only you can bring to them with your time and attention, the difference only you can make when you showed up. So I want you to think about this for a moment. What is your legacy going to be? What's your legacy now? If on your 80th birthday, your family and friends were to gather around to celebrate your life, your legacy, to raise a glass and give you a toast in celebration of your life, what would they say about you? What would they say about what you meant to their lives? What stories would they tell? What would they say about the things you lived, the things you modeled, the things you taught them? How you've inspired them, what they love most about you, what they learned about themselves through you, because of you. and what you think about what that moment would be like for you on your 80th birthday, to hear those stories about all the wonderful things you did for somebody else's life. Ask yourself this question. What changes do you need to make in your life right now in order to realize that moment on your 80th birthday? Thank you all for coming today. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for educating me. Thank you for giving me your time and attention. It means the world to me. Hopefully, I have given you some value today. Hopefully, I've given you some things that you can take back into your lives and add more value to you and everyone whose lives you touch. Thank you so much.